what's up, guys? I told you I would be coming at you with a bunch of videos as far as how our review is going to go, and your finals coming up. This is video one. Watch it; it will help you. I guarantee you. It's going to go step by step. We're going to look at everything that's going to be on that culminating activity. So please, please, please watch this. If you don't, you're going to fail and be sad. All right. So we are today looking at the imperialization, the imperialistic phase of the United States. Right. So that's the annexation of Hawaii and the Spanish-American War. Those are two key things we're going to look at. So, starting at the beginning, in 1897, William McKinley becomes the President of the United States of America. Now, the next year, in 1898, two pretty major things happen. Not only the annexation of Hawaii, but also Spanish-American War. So starting out, let's go ahead and look at the annexation of Hawaii. Now remember, annexation itself is really just acquiring an area of land, right? It's ours now. And we didn't just show up and do this. We actually had several treaties with the Hawaiian government to import and export various goods, specifically sugar. Very, very hot commodity. We love it today, just like we love it then. So we see this expanding market for sugar. Now, that sounds all fine and dandy, but in America at that time, there's a couple things going on that you need to know about. First of all, and this is a worldwide phenomenon, is the growth of nationalism. Now, remember, nationalism is extreme pride in your country, and America is no different than anywhere else. Kids are required to say the Pledge of Allegiance every day. People are flying the American flag more and more, and people are proud to be an American. Now, at the same time this is going on, America is actually seeing itself in a depression, an economic depression, not the Great Depression in the 1930s, but definitely a depression. Now, why is that happening? With the Industrial Revolution, with things expanding and growing, we have a large influx of immigrants, as well as an American bank, or not American bank, a British bank fails, which has a ripple effect that affects the United States. This causes about a 17% unemployment. 15,000 businesses will close, and there's a lot of overcrowding in the cities, again, because of really the Industrial Revolution kicking off. So, what's going on in Hawaii? Why are we annexing it? Let's find out. So, we're sitting there with all these treaties, and eventually we see all these other countries imperializing various places throughout the world. And now, since the United States has had such a pretty good relationship with Hawaii, we pretty much in 1898 say this is ours now. Um, we set up a naval base at Pearl Harbor, and there we go. Now, interestingly enough, by annexing Hawaii and making it a territory of the United States, it is then eligible to become a state, and it would in 1959, several years after, 60 years after we annexed it, but it's ours. And this is really the first taste of imperialism that America has. Again, by doing this, it does a couple things. It gives national pride, so we see an increase in nationalism. It's also going to help the economy, right? We're in this type of depression. So how does that help? Young men are signing up to join the Navy, join the Army, which goes out and they're going to go take lands. They have a job. So we see uh, this increase of young men in the workforce. And by annexing Hawaii, we see America taking a step forward. Now, let's move to the Spanish American War. Now, this is a little bit more in depth and might be a little confusing, so bear with me. In that same year of 1898, there is a rebellion in Cuba. Now, Cuba at that time is controlled by Spain. Spain at one point was this great empire. If you guys remember back to world history, Spanish exploration, and Spain was this great naval power throughout the world. Well, the only places they really had left were Cuba and the Philippines. That's essentially all they had. So, um, once Cuba rebels and is fighting the Spanish government, the United States, with all their pride and nationalism, sees in these news articles that Spain is committing all of these various atrocities on the Cuban people. And so, with this sense of, hey, we're America, we decide to step in. Now, McKinley is like, I really don't want to go to war or nothing, but I got to do something. So he sends a ship to Havana, and that's in Cuba. And the ship is called the USS Maine. Now, the USS Maine is in the Havana harbor, and it explodes and sinks. Now, there's really no explanation for this. There hasn't been any historical documentation that said, hey, Spain blew it up, or maybe there was just gunpowder on it and it exploded. Regardless, the American people saw this and wanted blood. They go, the Spanish blew up our ship. We should go to war with them. So they do. And the Americans blame Spain. The government blames Spain. And on April 21st, 1898, the United States declares war on Spain with the slogan, remember the Maine, to hell with Spain. It's very, very creative. So now, once the United States declares war on Spain, um, Spain knows they can't win. They can't defeat the United States. They don't have the naval power, they don't have the manpower, but they go to war anyway. Now, why do this? If you know you're going to lose, why do it? Now, there's two reasons for this. One, Cuba and the Philippines were the last territories held by Spain, right? During their empire, they had everything, and now they're down to two. They have the Cuba and the Philippines. So they really didn't want to lose that. It was the last ditch. Hey, this is ours. And number two, there's a lot of dishonor in just surrendering without a fight. If they did this, it would cause distrust in the Spanish government. The people might rebel. So they're kind of forced into fighting the United States. So at this point, you have the Spanish American War. Now, this was a war fought on two fronts by the United States. I know you don't have a map, and I don't have a map with me right now either, but Cuba is off the southern tip of Florida, which is kind of in the Atlantic Ocean, and in the Philippines, which is closer to Asia, which is in the Pacific. So we're going to be fighting in two different places that are controlled by Spain. Um, which, as we know, fighting in two fronts is never a good sign. But what are you going to do? So early on, there's this U.S. general. His name is General George Dewey. He goes to Cuba and he's faced by the Spanish Armada, the Spanish Navy, and smashes them. Right now, this doesn't totally defeat the Spanish in Cuba, but it does defeat their navy, which allows the United States to take their navy over to the Philippines, which is easy, which is good, right? More people in one area. That doesn't mean that there's not going to be foot soldiers in Cuba, because there would be. So the United States sends our ships over to the Philippines, and kind of along the way, there's this little island of Guam, and we show up. And traditionally, when a friendly ship goes by, you fire off like a friendly hello shot. So the United States fires off a shot like a hello, and Guam is like, you know what, you can have Guam. Why? Well, Guam didn't have any weapons, so they were afraid that the United States would imperialize them. So literally, we show up, and Guam's like, "Here's the keys to Guam. It's yours." So we had no war in Guam, but we're still fighting the Philippines. Or not fighting the Filipinos, but we're fighting the Spanish in the Philippines. So um, back to Cuba, the United States landed some ground forces in a spot called Guantanamo Bay. From that landing, they're going to be able to work their way into Cuba, and it's pretty slow going, but they do work their way in there. The first group to really lead a charge into Cuba is a volunteer group known as the Rough Riders, led by future President Theodore Roosevelt, or Teddy Roosevelt. Um, and his actions and everything he does in Cuba really make him a household name and set him up to become president of the United States later on. Over the next several months, the United States would go ahead and they'd work their way further into Cuba, and eventually they'd take aim at Puerto Rico, because why not? Now, by December of that year, so by December of 1898, the Spanish government decides to surrender and sign a peace treaty with the United States. Now, in this peace treaty, it's pretty one-sided, and that's the way it is because the war was pretty one-sided. The United States receives Cuba, the Philippines, Guam, and that's what they get. What does Spain get? $20 million, and they become kind of a laughing stock. Like, yeah, you guys used to be good, and now you're terrible, right? It's kind of like the Seattle Seahawks. Anyway, um, but America gets a really big taste of imperialism. They're moving forward, and they start to emerge as a world power. Now, Cuba would remain as protected by the United States. They never became a territory of the United States. They had their own government, and they were taken care of by the U.S. when they needed it. It only lasted a few years until 1902, when Cuba would end up gaining its independence. But the United States maintained control of Guantanamo Bay, and we still do. We have a prison there. If you're unfamiliar with Guantanamo Bay. Anyway, but the Spanish American War went really, really well for the United States. Um, it showed that the Spanish Empire was dead and the United States Empire was born. And that's really the Spanish American War in a nutshell. Lastly, I do want to talk about open door policy. I won't really spend too much time on it, but I want you to know what it is. In 1899, so the year after we annex Hawaii and the year after the Spanish American War ends, uh, the United States is looking to expand markets further and further and decide, you know what, we should be able to trade with China without any tariffs or taxes. And this should be an open door, in and out, come and go as we please. Now, China really wasn't all about this. They were like, yeah, no, we don't want to do that. We have everything we need. Why would we want to trade with you? But the United States does something kind of shady, and they introduced this drug called opium, and pretty much half of China becomes addicted to opium. Well, you can't get opium in China, so you got to buy it from the United States. So essentially, we got trade agreements with China because we got them hooked on drugs. Great, great message for the youth. Anyway, it did open a huge trading market. Now the United States has Asia they can trade with. They have Hawaii where we can grow things and have naval bases. We control the Philippines, uh, Cuba. We have pretty much all access to, and it really does help America grow as a world power and helps us out of that depression. Again, not the depression, but a depression, and moves us forward as a dominating figure in the world. Now, I've always kind of thought imperialism really looks a lot like manifest destiny. If you remember back to Western expansion and that God given right and God given ability to go west and conquer and take what is rightfully ours, really that looks like imperialism a little bit to me, right? Imperialism is going out, taking things for your country from a weaker country because you can. And manifest destiny was kind of the same kind of deal. And this would happen. This was a common thing throughout the world, but America was not innocent from imperialism, right? We have the annexation of Hawaii, we have the Spanish American War, and even though the open door policy with Asia and China is not necessarily imperialism, it definitely helped us grow as a nation. So, this is video number 1. I'll be posting 2 to 3 videos a day for the next few days. Remember, your culminating activity will be next week. It'll be Thursday and Friday, the 14th and 15th. Now, once you start it, you'll have 2 hours. So make sure you get it done. All right. Have a great one, guys. See you next time.